Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Joe Ross back here. I wanted to talk to you guys about a technique that I sometimes use called exposure blending, or more accurately for this type of an image, time blending. Right now I'm teaching my mentor class, and a student put up a very long exposure on a windy day, and he created these beautiful sweeping clouds in the composition. But unfortunately, a lot of the trees in the foreground over the long exposure blurred out as well. So I was suggesting that when you're in a situation like that, when you're doing a very long exposure for creative effect, whether that's movement in clouds or in water or whatever, that you may want to consider doing a second exposure at a much higher ISO in case you need to blend in details that blur out during that long exposure. And I have an example here that I want to show you guys. And these images were taken in, let me just expand this, in the Olympic rainforest of Washington. And, so you can see I have this river scene with this really delicate foliage in the background. And for the first shot here, I wanted to run a very long exposure to create this beautiful silky cotton candy effect in the water. But I was a little concerned that, and I could see some details that were beginning to blur out in the finer leaves in the background during the length of that exposure. So this was shot at ISO 50 at about 4 seconds. I'll check the metadata, 4 seconds. And so then I brought my ISO up considerably to be able to shoot this one at 1/4 of a second. Now you can see that the water looks very different. It has some interesting texture in it, but it doesn't have that sort of silky cotton candy soft feeling that I wanted from the image. But doing that much faster exposure allowed me to maintain sharp detail in the foliage in the background that was, some of it was beginning to blur out over the long 4-second exposure. So the question is, now you have these two images that you've shot, one at a long exposure, and you've brought your ISO up and you've shot the second image. How can you put these two together? And I'm going to show you a very easy way to do that inside of Photoshop. So I'm in Lightroom. I haven't made any adjustments to either one of these raw files, but that is something that you would normally want to do, is to develop each one before you put them together. But in just in an effort to save time today and make this sort of a short and sweet video, I'm going to skip the raw processing on this image and show you the essential part of putting the time blend together. So with both images selected in your library, you're going to come up to Photo and scroll down to Edit In and jump over to Open as Layers in Photoshop. This is the preferred method. Instead of just opening the images into Photoshop and then having to copy and paste one image on top of the other, this will bring both images automatically into a layer stack. Okay? Let me maximize Photoshop here and just bring our image up. All right, so here's the shot. You can see that we have two layers over here. The top layer is the blurred water, and the base layer is the shorter exposure. Now, you may not want them in that sequence always, so you can always drag one atop of the other. But I'm going to go ahead and just stick with this sequence that we have up now and add a black mask to this long exposure. I'm sorry, to this short exposure, okay, that's on top. So if I come down to the Mask tab and hold down Alt or Option and click on the Add Layer Mask, I get a black mask. Now this black mask is now hiding this image, this short exposure, and all you're seeing is what's below it, which is the base layer, which is the long exposure for the water. What I want to simply do now, and this is very, very easy for an image like this, is to grab my brush. So I'll select B on my keypad for my brush. Let me just expand this window a little bit. And then I'm going to make sure that the brush is set to a 0% hardness, so it's a very soft brush. And then I can use the bracket keys to make that brush larger or smaller. And you can see that happening right here. Okay. I want to be painting white onto the mask to begin to reveal the sharp foliage in the background. So I make sure that white is my foreground color. And with my brush at 100%, I'm going to simply start painting on the image. Now I'm not actually painting on the photograph itself. What I'm painting on is the mask which is selected. And you'll notice as I ran that brush over the image, what it's doing here, and I'll show you in a moment, let me just deselect this, is it's painting white onto the black mask, thereby revealing this image that the mask is linked to. Because remember, in Photoshop, when you're working with layers and masks, black is going to conceal the adjustment or the image, and white is going to reveal the adjustment or the image. So now it's a really simple task of simply painting white onto the mask in the areas where I wanted to reveal the sharper details from the faster exposure. And I'll just work my way down with the brush until I get right to the water. And you can really see that happening in these branches down here that are hanging over the water. And remember, as the water is rushing through, it's putting up an air current from the water, and it is blurring out a lot of the details and the finer foliage along its banks, okay? And I'll just continue to paint on the image. I want to double check it, so I'm going to hold down Alt-Option and click on the mask, and then fill in any areas in the scene that I meant to paint, but I missed somehow when I was doing the blend. And then I'll click Alt-Option to turn that off. And now I have the best of both worlds. I have a long exposure for creative movement, and I have a shorter exposure where I've blended in the finer detail in the image, which will be important in the printing and presentation of the shot to not have those blurred elements. All right, well, I hope you guys like this quick and short little tutorial. Make sure that you are subscribed to our video subscribe to our channel to get all of our videos. We're going to be doing a lot of these, and I look forward to continuing this creative and technical adventure with everyone. Have a great day.